You're just dead weight, Nate snarled, yanking the ticket from my hand. I should have brought Maddie instead. I watched him jog towards a woman with a smug smile. By the casual swing of her blonde hair and the way she leaned into him, I knew it was Maddie Harper. I felt a calm satisfaction wash over me. Taking out my phone, I texted, Phase 1 complete. Hours earlier, at our apartment in Chicago, Nate had thrown his clothes into a suitcase, barely looking up. This trip is long overdue, Evie, he said, his tone meaning more pressure than excitement. Sure, Nate, I replied, folding his shirts neatly. I can't believe we're actually doing this. Our relationship had always been complicated. We met in graduate school. The passion was immediate and intense, but years down the line that fire had cooled to a flicker. Nate's obsession with his work, the long nights and dismissive sighs, were nails in our marital coffin. He suddenly suggested a honeymoon after 4 years of dreary anniversaries and broken promises. Why now? My gut wrangled with suspicion, but I smiled and went along. Every action I took moved the pieces of a larger plan. Are you going to pack your swimsuit, or are we sticking to the mountains? I asked, trying to keep my tone light and casual. Nate looked up, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. Mountains? Definitely. I need a break from everything, including you. Those words stung, but not unexpectedly. I'd heard worse in the past year. Nate's affair with Maddie wasn't a secret to me anymore, though he thought it was. I'd confronted him, but he dismissed me as paranoid, again and again, but actions spoke louder than accusatory words. At the airport, Nate's irritation grew palpable as we waited in the endless security line. Can you at least hurry up? He snapped, glancing at the clock. We'll miss our flight. I kept my composure, smiling politely at the TSA agent who took her sweet time checking our IDs. Nate impatiently tapped his foot, oblivious that this trip wasn't destined to be another of his getaways. We reached Gate 17, and I saw her, Maddie, in a red coat and a look of unbridled glee. Nate rushed up to her, barely a goodbye thrown my way. I watched the two chit-chatting, a hollow sense of betrayal transforming into a strategic calm. Taking out my phone, I sent the text. Then I walked, unwavering, towards the neighboring gate. Instead of Alaska, my final destination was a small cafe in O'Hare where Tim, my tech-savvy brother, awaited me. Is it done? He asked as I slid into the booth. Yes, I nodded. Tim pulled out a laptop, its screen blinking with messages. Everything's set. We've got the evidence we need. Ready for the public showdown? I sipped my coffee, steeling myself for what was to come. Absolutely. He won't know what hit him. We watched Nate and Maddie pass by, engrossed in each other. They were blissfully unaware of the storm building around them, but they'd soon feel its full force. Looking at my reflection in the cafe window, I didn't see the hurt wife. I saw the woman ready to reclaim her strength, not through tears and tantrums, but through calculated justice. I glanced back at Tim. Let's go. Time's ticking. Alaska awaits. We walked out, a journey of consequence about to unfold. The plane ticket in my bag wasn't just a trip. It was a ticket to freedom and retribution. For every deceit Nate spun, a tenacity burned in me stronger. The deceptive skies would clear, and justice would prevail. As the taxi cruised through the bustling streets of Chicago, my mind replayed the moments that led us here. From passionate beginnings to Nate's growing absences, our relationship was a shadow of what it used to be. Each anniversary skipped, every milestone ignored, chipped away at the love that once bound us. I remember the day I found out about Maddie Harper. It was a cold November evening. Nate had left his laptop open, and a message popped up. I can't wait to see you again, Maddie. My heart sank, but I read on, uncovering months of deceit. Even then, when I confronted him, he brushed it off. You're paranoid, he had said, eyes never leaving his screen. There's nothing between Maddie and me. She's just a colleague. Months later, I found a selfie of them in our car. Care to explain this? I demanded, shoving my phone in his face. He barely glanced at it. It's just a friendly picture. You're reading too much into it, Evie. Despite his dismissals, I felt the cold, hard truth in my bones. Nate Stone had checked out of our marriage a long time ago, but I wasn't going to let this slide. I needed to reclaim my dignity, and for that, Nate had to face music. The taxi pulled up to Tim's apartment. He was waiting outside, a concerned look on his face. You okay? Tim asked as I stepped out. I'm fine, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Let's get to work. Inside, his apartment was cluttered with tech gadgets and wires, a stark contrast to Nate's pristine office space. Tim pulled out a chair for me. "How do you want to do this?" he asked, opening his laptop. "We gather everything, texts, emails, photos, anything and everything that ties Nate to Maddie," I said. Tim nodded, fingers flying across the keyboard. "You sure about going through with this?" I stood firm. "Yes, I've let him walk all over me for too long. It's time to end this." Hours flew by as we pieced together the digital puzzle of Nate's betrayal. Every photo, every message stabbed like a knife, but they were necessary wounds. Bit by bit, the file grew thicker and my resolve stronger. "Here's the video evidence," Tim said, turning the screen towards me. It showed Nate and Maddie leaving a hotel, arms around each other. I felt a familiar sting, but pushed it aside. Good, we need more of this. Just then my phone buzzed. It was Lisa Levinson, my best friend and a fierce lawyer. "Ready to drop the hammer?" she asked. "More than ready," I said, looking across the room at Tim. "We've got enough. What's the next step?" "We gather the troops," Lisa said firmly. "It's time to loop in Nate's boss and make sure our plan is airtight." Tim's eyes met mine, a shared determination passing between us. Nate thought he could keep up his charade indefinitely, but his time was running out. Every lie, every moment of gaslighting was about to cascade into a tidal wave he couldn't escape. I looked at the assembled evidence, a sense of finality settling over me. This was it. The collapse of Nate's double life was imminent. And as the pieces snapped into place, there was no turning back. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice, and Nate Stone was about to get a hefty dose of it. Tim's fingers danced across the keyboard, pulling up more and more evidence against Nate. Every new piece of information was another nail in the coffin of our marriage. We had gathered enough to paint the full picture of his deceit. Now it was time to bring in my closest allies. "Lisa's on her way," Tim said, not looking up from his screen. He was so focused, every click another bullet loaded in our arsenal. Minutes later, Lisa swept into the room, her presence commanding. She dropped her bag on the table and flashed a determined smile. "Let's make sure Nate doesn't wriggle out of this." "Look at this," I said, pushing a file towards her. "Emails, texts, even photos. It's undeniable." Lisa grinned. "He's going to wish he never crossed you, Evie." "I need him to face the consequences, Lisa. Not just for me, but for every lie he's told." She nodded, setting down a stack of legal papers. "We've got grounds for a solid case. Infidelity, emotional distress, you name it." Tim's phone buzzed. "Mark's in," he said, glancing at me. "Nate's boss wants to meet us. He didn't look pleased when I told him what Nate's been up to." A surge of determination washed over me. Good, the more eyes on this, the better. Tim looked concerned for a moment. "You know this could ruin Nate professionally. Is that what you really want?" I met his gaze steadily. "He ruined our marriage. It's only fair his actions have consequences." Hours blurred by as we fine-tuned our plan. Calls were made, meetings arranged, everything was aligning perfectly. But amidst the planning, my mind frequently drifted back to Nate's dismissive attitude. The way he brushed off my concerns, his blatant disregard for our relationship. A vivid memory resurfaced of our last anniversary. I'd set up a candlelit dinner, dressed in his favorite outfit. He'd walked in, eyes glued to his phone, muttering a quick, "Not in the mood, Evie," before retreating into his office. The sting of that moment fueled my resolve. As the sun set, we wrapped up our preparation. I turned to Lisa. "Tomorrow, we confront him in Alaska. Everything needs to be perfect." "Nate won't know what hit him," she assured. Tim nodded, packing up his laptop. "I'll be there early to set up the tech, every angle covered. And I'll handle the legal side," Lisa added. I looked between my two closest allies. "Thank you, both of you. This isn't just about Nate anymore. It's about reclaiming my life." Lisa placed a hand on my shoulder. "We've got your back, Evie. Always." The night air was crisp as I left Tim's apartment. The skyscrapers of Chicago loomed overhead, but I felt taller, more confident than ever. Nate thought he could undermine me, brush me aside. Tomorrow, that illusion would crumble. Back at my apartment, the silence was deafening. But it was a silence filled with anticipation, not loneliness. I wasn't the same Evie who had begged for Nate's attention. I was stronger, ready for whatever came next. The next morning, we headed towards the airport. My luggage was light, but my heart felt heavy with the weight of what was to come. But there was no turning back now. As I walked towards the gate, I imagined Nate's smug face turning to shock, to desperation. He'd finally understand the gravity of his actions. Alaska awaited, and so did the reckoning. I pulled out my phone one last time before boarding. "Everything set?" I texted Tim. "Locked and loaded," came the reply. I smiled, slipping the phone back into my bag. This was it. My journey to retribution and reclaiming my life had begun, and Nate Stone's world was about to come crashing down. As our plane neared Alaska, my gaze drifted out the window. The mountains below were cold and unyielding, just like my resolve. Tim had arrived earlier and was already setting up. Lisa was seated next to me, flipping through our evidence one last time. "Nervous?" she asked, eyes not leaving the papers. "Not really," I said. "I've been waiting for this moment too long to be nervous now." Arriving at our destination, Tim greeted us with a tight nod. "Everything's in place. Nate and Maddie are at their hotel, unsuspecting." The tension between Nate and me had been at an all-time high leading up to this trip. Every word exchanged was laced with animosity. Yet, he acted like this trip was a normal vacation. His capacity for deception was astounding, but his arrogance was his downfall. Nate's surprise honeymoon arrangements at first seemed perfect. Almost too perfect. A 5-star lodge, private mountain tours. He didn't realize his perception of control was a glaring mistake. I wasn't here to enjoy the sights. I was here to dismantle the facade he'd built. "Evie, you okay?" Tim's voice broke my thoughts. I nodded. "Just preparing myself." We walked into the hotel lobby, the lavish interior starkly different from the cold reality about to hit Nate. From across the room I spotted him. He was laughing with Maddie, completely oblivious to our presence. The scene would have hurt once, but now it only fueled my determination. The plan was simple: a public confrontation. Tim would handle the tech, ensuring everything was captured. Lisa had the legal documents ready. This wasn't just a personal reckoning, it was a meticulously planned exposure. Tim whispered, "All systems go, you ready?" I took a deep breath and walked towards Nate and Maddie. They were by the fireplace, Nate's arm draped possessively around her. I felt a surge of cold rage, but kept my voice calm. "Nate," I called out. The sound of his name made both of them turn. His expression hardened when he saw me. "Evie? What the hell are you doing here?" "Completing our honeymoon, remember?" I replied, stepping closer. "But I think we need to clear some things up first." Maddie looked confused, then wary. "Nate, who is this?" Nate's face twisted, a mix of anger and panic. "This," he spat, "is my wife, Evie, unfortunately." I ignored the sting of his words and nodded to Tim, who began recording. "Maddie, it's time you learn the truth." Nate tried to cut me off. "Evie, don't do this here. Not now." "Oh, but now is perfect," I said, pulling out the file. "Emails, texts, photos. You've been cheating on me for months, Nate, and you need to face the consequences." Maddie's eyes widened, then narrowed at Nate. "Is this true?" Nate tried to bluster his way out. "Maddie, it's not what it looks like." "She can see exactly what it is," I retorted, tossing the photos onto the table. "You've manipulated and lied to both of us. It's over, Nate." He lunged towards me, but Lisa stepped in, placing the legal documents between us. "Time to face the music, Nate," she said, voice icy. "You'll regret this," Nate hissed, eyes darting around as if looking for an escape. "Not as much as you'll regret underestimating me," I replied. "Tim, how's our audience?" Tim held up a phone. "Nate, meet your boss. Mark's watching right now." The color drained from Nate's face. "Evie, please, don't do this." "It's already done, Nate," I said. "This is just the beginning." As the reality of the situation sank in for Nate, I felt an overwhelming sense of liberation. The mountains of Alaska loomed in the background, a fitting witness to the end of Nate's mountains of lies. This confrontation was the first step towards reclaiming my life, and I intended to savor every moment of it. Nate's face drained of color, his eyes wide with shock. He tried to form words, but nothing came out. I watched him, feeling a cold satisfaction. This was just the beginning. Tim kept recording while Lisa handed Nate a pen. "Time to face the consequences, Nate. Sign these," she commanded. Nate's hand trembled as he took the pen. Maddie stood up, confusion giving way to rage. "How could you do this, Nate? To both of us?" "Don't listen to her, Maddie. It's not what it looks like," Nate stammered, desperately trying to salvage the situation. I stepped closer, my voice steady. "Stop lying, Nate. It's over. All the evidence is right here." He glared at me, then turned to Maddie, his voice pleading. Maddie, I love you. Evie's just trying to turn you against me. Maddie's eyes welled up, betrayal written all over her face. You love me? How can I believe anything you say now? Tim's phone buzzed and he held it up. Mark's on his way here. He saw everything. You're done, Nate. Nate's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. He threw the pen on the table. Fine, I'll sign. Happy now? Lisa placed the divorce papers in front of him. This is just the start, Nate. You'll also face the company's ethics committee. Nate scribbled his signature, his arrogance crumbling. Lisa collected the papers, her expression fierce. You'll regret betraying Evie. Nate glared, voice bitter. You think you've won, Evie? This isn't over. I stared him down, unflinching. It is for you. Your lies, your manipulation, they end today. Nate crumpled back into his seat, defeated. Just then, Mark walked into the cafe, flanked by a few colleagues. His face was grave, eyes fixed on Nate. We need to talk. Maddie stood up, tears streaming down her face. I can't believe you did this to me. I thought we had something real. Nate reached out to her, desperation in his eyes. Maddie, please, you have to believe me. She shook her head, backing away. No, Nate, we're done. Tim cut the feed, satisfied that everything had been captured. He turned to me, offering a supportive nod. You did it, Evie. Mark approached, a mix of disappointment and anger on his face. Nate, pack your things when we get back. You're suspended, pending investigation. The weight of his words hung in the air, sealing Nate's fate. I felt a wave of relief. The confrontation was intense, but it was necessary. Nate had to face the consequences of his actions. Walking out of the cafe with Tim and Lisa, I inhaled the crisp Alaskan air. This was the beginning of a new chapter. I wasn't entirely free yet, but the chains of my past were breaking. This is step 1, Lisa said, looking at me. Next, we finalize the divorce and move forward. I nodded, determined. I don't just want to move forward, I want to thrive. Tim smiled, wrapping an arm around me. And you will. We'll make sure of it. As we walked down the street, I felt lighter, a sense of liberation taking root. The road ahead was still long, but I was ready. With supportive friends and a renewed sense of self, I was prepared to face whatever came next. The chill of Alaska contrasted sharply with the warmth of my resolve. Nate's deceit had crumbled, and from the rubble, I would build something stronger, more resilient. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive. And as we headed back to Chicago, I knew one thing for certain. My story was far from over. We arrived in Alaska in the early morning, the air biting but invigorating. Our meeting point was a local eatery, a cozy place bustling with tourists. Tim and Lisa were already inside, setting up our final act. Everything's in place? I asked as I joined them at the table. Tim nodded, clicking away at his laptop. All systems go. Nate and Maddie will be here soon. Lisa glanced at her watch. Once they're here, it's showtime. I sat down, the wooden chair feeling cold against my back. I scanned the room, the diner already buzzing with the breakfast crowd. Nate's arrogance would be his undoing. He always wanted an audience, and today he'd get one. A few minutes later, Nate and Maddie walked in. They didn't see us at first, too engrossed in their conversation. Maddie's laughter was loud, carefree. It'd be the last time she looked at Nate with such trust. Ready? Tim whispered. I nodded. Let's do this. We stood up and approached their table. Nate looked up, eyes widening in surprise. Evie, what are you doing here? Public forum, public shame, Tim murmured softly, ensuring his camera was angled perfectly. Nate, I started, my voice steady. You owe Maddie and everyone here an explanation. Maddie's smile faltered, confusion wrinkling her brow. What's going on? Nate's eyes darted around, searching for an out. There was none. Evie, not here, please. Oh, here is perfect, I said, laying out the files on their table. These are your emails, texts, photos. Maddie, he's been lying to you just as he lied to me. Maddie's face turned pale as she studied the documents. Is this true? She asked Nate, her voice trembling. Nate tried to grab her hand, but she pulled away. Maddie, listen to me. This isn't what it looks like. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly on the floor. Then what is it, Nate? Explain. People in the diner were now paying attention, whispers traveling through the room. Nate's facade was crumbling. It's complicated. Not really, I interjected. You betrayed both of us, and now everyone knows. Mark walked in then, his face grave. He pushed his way to our table, eyes locked on Nate. We need to talk, he commanded. Nate's shoulders slumped, his defiance turning into desperation. Mark, you don't understand. Mark ignored him and turned to me. Evie, I saw the footage. You've done the right thing. I thanked him, feeling a rush of validation. Nate turned to Maddie, his voice a whisper. Please, forgive me. Maddie shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I was a fool to believe you. Lisa stepped forward, legal documents in hand. Nate, these are the consequences. You'll sign the divorce papers now, or we take this to court. Publicly. Nate's face contorted with rage. You can't do this. Oh, we can and we will, Lisa shot back. You played with lives, Nate. Now pay the price. Under the weight of the stares and the irrefutable evidence, Nate finally cracked. He signed the papers, his hands shaking with every stroke of the pen. It was over. He was finished. Mark gave Nate one last look of disdain. Your office will pack your things. Don't come back. As we left the eatery, the weight of years slipped off my shoulders. The chill in the air felt liberating. This was more than just revenge. It was reclaiming my life. Lisa squeezed my arm. You did it, Evie. He faced the music. Tim pulled me into a hug, and he'll never forget it. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was free from Nate's shadow. Alaska's cold landscape was a stark backdrop for this chapter closing, and upon returning to Chicago, I'd start anew. With Tim, Lisa, and my unyielding resolve, I was ready to face whatever came next. Nate Stone was exposed, and Evelyn Stone was reborn. Back in Chicago, I felt a strange combination of relief and exhaustion. Nate was exposed, but the aftermath had just begun. I met Lisa at her office, ready to tackle the next steps. Here are the finalized divorce papers, Lisa said, sliding them across her desk. Once he signs these, it's legally over. And if he refuses, I asked, though I knew the answer. He won't. Not after everything. He knows his position is weak, Lisa assured me, her confidence unwavering. A knock interrupted us, and Tim entered with a file folder. Got the receptionist at Nate's office to pull his work emails, more leverage. I took the folder, glancing through the contents. Perfect. We'll need all the ammunition we can get. Later that afternoon, Nate's name flashed on my phone. Reluctantly, I answered. Evie. His voice was a mix of anger and desperation. We need to talk. We have nothing left to say, I replied coldly. Sign the papers, Nate. It's over. You think you're so clever, ruining my life like this? His tone turned vicious. You'll pay for this. I felt a surge of defiance. You brought this on yourself. Accept the consequences. I hung up, meeting Lisa's approving nod. He'll crack. He always does. The next day, Nate showed up at Lisa's office, his smug demeanor replaced by desperation. He tossed the signed papers on her desk. There. Happy now? You have no one to blame but yourself, Lisa retorted, not even looking up from her desk. Get out, Nate, I said, my voice steady, and don't contact me again. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I felt a sense of finality. It was truly over. Lisa picked up the papers, leafing through them. With these signed, you're free, Evie. As the legalities wrapped up, I focused on rebuilding my life. I found a modern, cozy apartment downtown, a fresh start away from the ghost of Nate. Moving in, I felt a sense of self-reliance that had been missing for so long. One evening, as I unpacked, Tim and Lisa came over, bringing takeout. We sat on the floor, surrounded by half-open boxes and the scent of pad thai filling the room. Your place has potential, Tim said, slurping noodles. Like you. I smiled, feeling a warmth that had been absent for years. Thanks, Tim. It's good to start fresh. Lisa raised a glass of wine. To new beginnings. As we clinked glasses, the future felt wide open. My career picked up as well. Without Nate's constant dismissiveness, I thrived at my marketing firm, gaining recognition and respect. The emptiness that used to gnaw at me was replaced by a relentless drive. One evening, Lisa and I planned a hiking trip to the Grand Canyon, a celebration of newfound freedom. As we mapped out our route, she looked at me seriously. You've come a long way, Evie. I'm proud of you. I felt a swell of gratitude. I couldn't have done it without you both. This is just the beginning. As we toasted to our upcoming adventure, I felt truly at peace for the first time in years. Nate's shadow no longer loomed over me. The path ahead was bright and full of promise. For the final time, I allowed myself to think back to that tumultuous confrontation. Nate had been dethroned, his facade ripped away, and I had emerged stronger, more resilient. That chapter was closed, and I stepped into my new life with confidence, surrounded by the unwavering support of Tim and Lisa. In the midst of chaos, I had found my peace, and I was ready to embrace the fresh start waiting for me, to beginnings, self-respect, and finding worth beyond the past, this finding worth beyond the palate, and I was ready to live it to the fullest. Walking into my new apartment, I could finally breathe. My modern, cozy haven was a haven from the turbulence of my past. The sleek furniture and minimalistic decor were a stark contrast to the cluttered mess of my life with Nate. I rolled up my sleeves and got to unpacking the last of the boxes when my phone buzzed with a message from Lisa. "Drinks tonight? Celebrating your new life?" "Definitely," I texted back. I glanced at the clock. Just a couple more hours to sort through some lingering work emails, then I'd be ready to toast to freedom. As the evening shades crept in, I couldn't help but revel in the independence I now had. Nate was no longer a looming specter in my life. The finalization of our divorce brought more than legal liberation. It reinstated my sense of self. My brother Tim dropped by minutes before Lisa arrived. He set a bottle of wine on the counter. "How's the new place treating you?" "It's perfect," I said, genuinely smiling. "Feels like home already." "We knew you could do it, Evie." His eyes softened. "Ready to put the past behind you?" "More than ready." Lisa walked in, holding a tray of appetizers. "All right, let's get this party started." We settled in the living room, glasses in hand. The easy camaraderie between us was punctuated by laughter and plans for our upcoming hiking trip. For the first time in forever, the weight on my chest felt lifted. "So the Grand Canyon," I said, clinking my glass with Lisa's. "Think we'll make it to the bottom and back up without killing each other?" Lisa chuckled. "I'm pretty sure we've survived worse." Tim raised his glass. "To fresh starts and finding our worth." "To fresh starts," I echoed, and we all took a hearty sip. The days flew by rapidly. My marketing firm took off, thanks to the newfound focus and energy I poured into it. Each project was a step further from the shadow Nate cast on my life. The sense of accomplishment replaced the empty feeling I used to carry. The night before our hiking trip, I packed my bags meticulously, making sure I had everything needed for the adventure. Lisa dropped by to double-check her list with mine. "Everything set?" she asked, checking her own backpack. "Yep," I replied. "I can't wait to disconnect from everything for a bit." We flew out early the next morning, the flight buzzing with excited tourists. The feeling of anticipation mingled with a sense of something more profound, a true, symbolic journey into new beginnings. The Grand Canyon's vast expanse greeted us, its beauty awe-inspiring and humbling. Standing at the edge, I felt a rush of emotions. This trip wasn't just a vacation. It was a testament to my resilience. As we trekked down the well-worn paths, Lisa and I bantered to keep our spirits high. Somewhere along the trail, we paused to take everything in. The breathtaking beauty around mirrored my internal transformation. By the time we reached the bottom, the surrounding stillness offered a rare chance for reflection. We set up camp, and under the starlit sky, had a minor celebration of our own. "I never thought I'd find peace in this chaos," I admitted, glass in hand. Lisa responded without missing a beat, "To fresh starts and finding our worth." We clinked our glasses, the moment signifying more than words could express. Hiking back up the canyon, filled with camaraderie and quiet determination, I felt nothing but gratitude. The struggles, the pain, all had led to this moment of tranquility and self-assurance. As the sun set on our final night, everything seemed to fall into place. The past was behind me, and an open future awaited. With the support of true friends and a rekindled spirit, I embraced my fresh start wholeheartedly. The light breaking over the horizon of the canyon mirrored the dawn of my new life, full of potential and promise. I stood there, drenched from head to toe, staring at the locked door of what used to be a symbol of our shared dreams. The storm outside mirrored the tempest in my heart, but it was nothing compared to the hurricane about to be unleashed. Gripping the doorknob, I inhaled deeply, bracing myself for the confrontation that had been brewing for far too long. "Ethan," my voice, sharper than I intended, cut through the pitter-patter of the rain as the door swung open, revealing my husband Ethan, looking as if he'd just seen a ghost. "We need to talk. Now." His gaze, once filled with warmth and love, now held a flicker of annoyance that quickly morphed into concern. "Kira, what's wrong? You're soaked." Ignoring the urge to break down, I steadied my voice, my eyes locked on his. "It's Lily," I said, the name of our daughter weighing heavily on my tongue. She's gone, Ethan." The color drained from his face, his body tensing as if preparing for a physical blow. Gone? What do you mean? Gone? Kira, please. The pain in his eyes was real, but so was the anger and betrayal simmering inside me. I mean, she's been in a terrible accident because you were too busy to care, because you've been too caught up in your own world to notice she needed you. Ethan staggered back as if I'd struck him, his hand reaching out for support against the doorframe. No, that can't be true. Kira, please, tell me this is a mistake. There was a part of me that wanted to take back the words, to soothe the agony etched across his face. But the larger part, the part fueled by months of frustration, anger, and heartache, needed him to feel the weight of his neglect. You should have been there, Ethan. For all the times you promised and failed to show, this is on you. His voice broke as he spoke. I need to see her. Please. The resolve in my heart wavered for a moment, seeing the man I once loved beyond measure crumble before me. But this was necessary, a shock to jolt him back to the reality from which he'd been absent far too long. She's at the hospital. They're doing everything they can, but you should have been the one doing everything for her long before this. Ethan moved past me, grabbing his keys and wallet in a haste, his actions filled with a panic I hadn't seen in years. I'll go now. I'll make it right, Kira. I swear. Watching him rush out into the storm, I felt a bitter mix of satisfaction and sorrow. This was the start of a long, arduous journey. A journey to make him understand the depth of his failures, not just as a husband, but as a father. The rain continued to pour, each drop a reminder of the tears shed in the silence of our crumbling home. As the sound of Ethan's car faded into the distance, I closed the door behind me, leaning against it for support. The house felt emptier than ever, a shell of the love and laughter it once held. But this was just the beginning of a reckoning for Ethan's negligence and the first step towards reclaiming the life that we, especially Lily, deserved. The deception about Lily's condition was a desperate, calculated move, a lie born out of the necessity to awaken Ethan from his complacency. The real battle, however, lay ahead. It was a fight for justice, for accountability, and above all, for the restoration of a broken family torn apart by indifference and presumed infidelity. Tonight the storm raged on, both outside and within the walls of the Wilsons' home, heralding the tumultuous journey that lay ahead. The hospital's fluorescent lights felt harsh against my eyes as I paced the sterile hallway, waiting for news on Lily. The lie I told Ethan gnawed at me, but desperation had driven me to extremes. The sound of approaching footsteps pulled me from my thoughts, and I turned to see Ethan, his face a mask of worry and fear. "How is she? Can I see her?" he asked, breathless, from what I assumed was a combination of his rush here and the anxiety consuming him. I hesitated, the moment of truth looming large. "She's stable. They're running some tests. Ethan, there's something I need to tell you." His relief at my first words was palpable, but confusion quickly took its place. "What is it? What's wrong?" Taking a deep breath, I faced him squarely. "Lily isn't gone, Ethan. I lied because I didn't know how else to get through to you. You've been so distant, so absent. She needed you, and you weren't there." The transformation in Ethan was immediate. Relief gave way to anger, his eyes narrowing. "You lied? About our daughter's life?" "Yes, I lied. Because nothing else seems to matter to you lately. Not me, not Lily, not the life we built together." My voice rose, tinged with anger and pain. Ethan stepped back as if my words were physical blows. "I can't believe you'd do this. How could you play with our emotions like that? How could you not see what's happening right in front of you?" I shot back, my frustration boiling over. "You're never here, Ethan, and even when you are, you're not really present. We might as well be ghosts." Our heated exchange was cut short by the nurse's arrival, her expression one of professional concern. "Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, Lily is asking for you." We followed her in silence, the tension between us thick. Seeing Lily, so small and vulnerable in her hospital bed, brought home the reality of our fractured family. Ethan's face softened as he approached her, guilt written all over his features. "Lily, I'm so sorry, sweetie. I should have been there for you," he murmured, taking her hand gently. Lily's response was a weak smile, her voice barely a whisper. "It's okay, Daddy. I just want us to be a family again." That night, after Lily fell asleep, Ethan and I sat in a cold, uncomfortable silence in the hospital cafeteria. The distance between us felt insurmountable, a chasm widened by neglect and hurtful truths. Ethan, we can't go on like this. Something has to change, I said, breaking the silence. He looked away, his jaw clenched. I don't know if I can forgive you for lying about something so serious. And I don't know if I can keep living with a ghost of a husband. Ethan, you've been avoiding us, staying out late, missing family dinners, forgetting Lily's events. Is there someone else? Ethan's silence was answer enough, his avoidance a deafening confirmation of my worst fears. I see, I whispered, feeling a cold resolve settling in my heart. This was more than just neglect. It was betrayal. The ride home was silent, each lost in our own thoughts. As I lay in bed that night, the magnitude of Ethan's betrayal weighed heavily on me. The love that once bound us together had been eroded by lies and indifference. But as I listened to Ethan's shallow breathing, a plan began to form in my mind, a plan to expose the truth and seek justice for the pain he had caused. The road ahead was clear. Ethan's negligence and infidelity would not go unpunished. For Lily's sake, and for my own, I would fight to ensure that he faced the consequences of his actions. This was no longer just about saving our marriage. It was about reclaiming my life and protecting my daughter from further harm. The following weeks were a blur of hospital visits and silent dinners at home. Lily's recovery was the only silver lining in the thick cloud of tension that hung over our household. Ethan's attempts at conversation felt forced, and my responses were cold, our interactions nothing more than necessary exchanges for Lily's sake. One evening, as Ethan sat across from me at the dinner table, his phone buzzed incessantly, a symphony of pings and vibrations that he diligently ignored. Lily, now more perceptive than ever, picked up on the tension. "Daddy, aren't you going to answer that?" she asked, her fork paused midair. Ethan shot me a wary glance before replying, "It's nothing important, Lily, just work." But Lily's curiosity was piqued. "You work a lot, Daddy. You missed my school play and my soccer game last week." Ethan's face tightened, the lines of guilt etching deeper. "I know, sweetheart. I'm really sorry. I promise I'll make it up to you." But promises were cheap, especially those that had been broken too many times before. I watched them, my heart aching for Lily, who still held hope for her father's redemption. Later that night, as Ethan and I lay in bed, miles apart in the same room, I turned to face him. "Ethan, your phone was going off all through dinner. Is it really just work?" He sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of his secrets. "Kira, I'm trying to fix things. Can't we just leave it at that?" "No, we can't. Not when fixing things means neglecting your family. Who were you texting, Ethan?" His silence was a chasm, deep and wide, filled with unspoken truths. The next morning, I decided it was time to seek those truths myself. While Ethan was in the shower, his phone lay unattended on the kitchen counter. A quick glance confirmed my suspicions. Messages from a contact saved only as E filled the screen, their tone intimate and their content damning. Armed with this knowledge, I confronted Ethan. "Who is E?" I asked, holding his phone up as he walked into the kitchen. Ethan froze, the color draining from his face. "Kira, it's not what you think." "Isn't it? Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing." "How should I think about that, Ethan?" My voice was steady, but inside, I was crumbling. He reached for the phone, but I pulled it back. "Ethan, you've been lying to me, to us. How long has this been going on?" The confession, when it came, was a mere whisper. "A few months. I'm sorry, Kira, I never wanted to hurt you." "Hurt me?" The realization that Ethan's betrayal wasn't just emotional but physical felt like a physical blow. The foundation of our marriage, our family, had been shattered by his actions. "I want you to leave," I said, the words cold and final. Ethan's protest was weak. "Kira, please, I can explain." "There's nothing to explain. You've made your choice. Now it's time you live with it, away from Lily and me." The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Ethan moved out, and I focused on Lily, who was confused and hurt by the sudden change. But amidst the turmoil, a fierce determination grew within me. Ethan's negligence and betrayal had not only damaged our family, but had also ignited a resolve within me to protect Lily and ensure that Ethan faced the consequences of his actions. As I lay in bed each night, the silence of the house, a stark reminder of the gaping hole Ethan's departure had left, my thoughts turned to revenge. Not petty acts of spite, but a calculated plan to expose his deceit, and ensure he could no longer harm us. For Lily's sake, and for my own, I was ready to fight. This was more than just a broken marriage. It was a battle for justice and a stand against betrayal. In the weeks that followed Ethan's departure, the void he left behind became a space for Lily and me to heal and bond over our shared pain. Yet, beneath the surface of our newfound routine, a storm was brewing, a storm of my own making, aimed squarely at Ethan. One afternoon, as Lily and I sat at the kitchen table working on her school project, the phone rang. The caller ID flashed Ethan's number, a sight that still made my heart skip, not out of love, but a cocktail of anger and anticipation. "Mom, it's Dad," Lily said, her voice a mix of hope and hesitation. I nodded, gesturing for her to answer. "Go ahead, sweetie. I'll be right here." Lily picked up the phone, her voice brightening as she spoke to Ethan. "Hi, Dad. Yeah, we're working on a project about the solar system. Mom's helping me." I listened, my emotions a whirlwind as Lily chatted animatedly, sharing details of her life from which Ethan had chosen to absent himself. After a few minutes, she handed me the phone, her eyes searching mine for any sign of what to expect. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself. "Ethan? Kira, how are you both doing?" His voice was tentative, laced with a guilt that did little to soothe the raw edges of my heart. "We're managing." "What do you want, Ethan?" There was a pause, and then, "I want to see Lily. I miss her, Kira. I miss you both." The words, meant to tug at my heartstrings, only fueled my resolve. "Lily is doing fine. As for seeing her, you know the conditions. Your actions have consequences, Ethan." Ethan's frustration was palpable, even through the phone. "I'm her father, Kira. You can't just cut me out of her life because of a mistake." "A mistake?" The word tasted bitter in my mouth. "No, Ethan. What you did was not a mistake. It was a series of choices that you consciously made, choices that hurt your family. You need to understand the gravity of that." The conversation ended shortly after, with promises from Ethan to do better and pleas for a chance to prove himself. But words were cheap, and his track record spoke volumes. That evening, as I tucked Lily into bed, her question caught me off guard. "Mom, is Dad a bad person?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "No, sweetie. Your dad made some bad choices, but that doesn't necessarily make him a bad person. It's complicated." Lily nodded, her understanding limited by her tender age. "I miss him," she admitted, her voice small. "I know, baby, I know." I kissed her forehead, my heart heavy with the burden of our situation. The days turned into weeks, and as the storm outside mirrored the turmoil in our lives, I began to lay the groundwork for my plan. Ethan's negligence and betrayal would not go unchecked. I started documenting everything. His missed visits, the late-night calls, the text messages from E. Everything would serve as ammunition for the battle ahead. One particularly stormy night, as lightning illuminated the sky and thunder shook the windows, I sat at the kitchen table, poring over the evidence I had gathered. The weather outside seemed to echo the chaos Ethan had brought into our lives, a fitting backdrop for my preparations. The sound of the doorbell shattered the silence, pulling me from my thoughts. I checked the clock. Almost midnight. Who could it be at this hour? I approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole before opening it to find Ethan on the other side, soaked from the rain, his eyes desperate. "Kira, we need to talk." I can't live like this," he pleaded, his voice breaking. The sight of him, so vulnerable, might have once stirred sympathy in my heart, but those days were long gone. "You should have thought about that before, Ethan. You made your choice." Closing the door on his pleading figure, I turned back to the evidence spread out for me. Ethan's time of reckoning was approaching, and I would be the storm that swept him away. The morning after Ethan's late visit, I woke with a resolve stronger than ever. The sight of him, drenched and desperate, had not softened my heart, but had instead solidified my determination to see through the plan I had been meticulously crafting. Ethan needed to face the full consequences of his actions, not just for me, but for Lily, whose innocent questions about her father's love and absence haunted me. I sat Lily down after breakfast, a serious conversation brewing over the remains of our meal. "Lily, your dad and I are going through a difficult time, as you know. It's important that you understand, no matter what happens, we both love you very much." Lily nodded, her eyes wide and trusting. "I know, Mom, but why doesn't Dad come to see us anymore?" The simplicity of her question stung, a reminder of the complexity of adult failures to a child's heart. Daddy made some mistakes, sweetheart. Right now, it's important for us to focus on being strong and happy together. As the day progressed, I took steps to initiate the next phase of my plan. I contacted a lawyer, detailing Ethan's neglect, his affair, and the impact of his actions on Lily and me. The lawyer listened, his voice calm and reassuring, promising to guide me through the process of holding Ethan accountable. That evening, Ethan called again, his voice a mixture of desperation and anger. "Kira, you're turning Lily against me. I have rights." "The only person turning Lily against you is you, Ethan. Your actions speak louder than any words could," I replied, my voice steady. "I want to see my daughter. I'll take this to court if I have to," he threatened, his voice gaining an edge. "If that's the route you choose, be prepared to face the consequences. I have documented everything, Ethan. Your neglect, your affair, everything. You think a court will look kindly on that?" There was silence on the other end, the weight of reality settling in. "Kira, please. There has to be another way." "The time for another way has long passed, Ethan. You made your choices. Now you live with them." After hanging up, I felt a surge of empowerment mixed with sorrow. This wasn't the life I had envisioned for us, but I was determined to emerge from this storm stronger, for Lily's sake. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal consultations and preparations. Ethan's sporadic attempts to contact us became more desperate, but I remained firm, bolstered by the support of my lawyer and the unwavering goal of securing a better future for Lily and me. One afternoon, as I collected mail from the mailbox, an envelope caught my eye. It was from Ethan. Hesitating for a moment, I opened it to find a letter and several photographs. Photos of us, happier times that now seemed like a distant memory. His letter spoke of regret, of a desire to turn back time and make different choices. But as I read his words, I couldn't help but feel it was too little, too late. That evening, as Lily and I sat on the couch, her head resting in my lap as we watched her favorite show, I realized the full extent of what I was fighting for. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. Justice for the pain Ethan had caused, for the neglect Lily had suffered, and for the betrayal that had shattered our family. As the days turned into weeks and the legal proceedings began to take shape, my resolve never wavered. Ethan had awakened a strength in me I never knew I had, a strength fueled by love for my daughter and a desire for justice. The storm that had once threatened to break me had instead forged a new path, one where I stood firm against the winds of betrayal and neglect, ready to fight for the future Lily and I deserved. The legal proceedings against Ethan unfolded with a cold, methodical precision that mirrored the detachment I had come to associate with our crumbling marriage. Each document, each piece of evidence, was a brick in the fortress I was building around Lily and me, a defense against the chaos Ethan had brought into our lives. One morning, as I prepared for another meeting with my lawyer, Lily approached me, her expression serious beyond her years. "Mom, will I have to choose between you and Dad?" Her question stopped me in my tracks. Kneeling down, I took her hands in mine. "No, sweetheart. This isn't about choosing sides. It's about making sure we're safe and happy. I'll do everything in my power to make sure you feel loved and protected, no matter what." Lily nodded, a semblance of relief washing over her face. "Okay, Mom, I trust you." The meeting with my lawyer that day was a turning point. Armed with the evidence of Ethan's neglect and infidelity, we outlined our strategy. But it was the private investigator's report that truly shifted the balance in our favor. Photos and detailed accounts of Ethan's affair, his frequent absences, and neglect of Lily painted a damning picture that no courtroom could ignore. "Ethan will have a hard time disputing these," my lawyer remarked, flipping through the report. "This strengthens your case significantly." As the court date approached, Ethan's attempts to reach out became more frantic. Voicemails and letters piled up, each one a desperate plea for reconciliation, for a second chance I knew we couldn't afford to give him. The day of the hearing was a maelstrom of emotions. Standing before the judge, I recounted the events that had led us here, each word a testament to the battle we'd been fighting in silence. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed diminished, his usual confidence replaced by a palpable sense of defeat. "Mrs. Wilson, your testimony and the evidence presented make a compelling case," the judge said, his voice grave. "Mr. Wilson, do you have anything to say in your defense?" Ethan's reply was a mix of apologies and excuses, a last-ditch effort to sway the judge's opinion. But the evidence was irrefutable, the impact of his actions on Lily and me undeniable. In the end, the judge's ruling was a vindication of everything we had endured. Full custody was granted to me, along with a stipulation for supervised visits for Ethan, should he seek them. The court also ordered Ethan to undergo counseling, recognizing the need for him to address the issues that had led to his neglectful behavior. As we left the courtroom, I felt Lily's hand slip into mine, her grip tight. "Is it over, Mom?" she asked, her voice hopeful yet tinged with uncertainty. I squeezed her hand, a promise in my grasp. "It's a new beginning, sweetie. We can start healing now." The victory in court was bittersweet. While it offered a legal resolution to our struggles, the emotional scars remained, a reminder of the cost of Ethan's betrayal. Yet as Lily and I walked out into the sunlight, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. The battle was over, but our journey of healing was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, Lily and I focused on rebuilding our lives. Therapy sessions, weekend outings, and quiet evenings at home became our new normal. Slowly, the laughter returned to our house, filling the spaces that grief and betrayal had once occupied. Ethan's attempts to reconnect became less frequent as he started his court-ordered counseling. I hoped, for Lily's sake, that he would find the help he needed to be a better father, even if from a distance. As for me, the fight had revealed a strength I never knew I possessed, a resilience forged in the fires of adversity. For Lily, for myself, I had stood up against the storm and emerged stronger. Our future was uncertain, but we faced it together, united by love and a bond that no betrayal could sever. The newfound peace in our home was palpable, a serene contrast to the storm that had raged before. Lily's laughter became the soundtrack of our lives, each day a step further away from the darkness that had once threatened to engulf us. But the final act of this drama was yet to unfold, a confrontation that would close the chapter on Ethan's betrayal once and for all. It was a crisp autumn morning when the call came. A number I didn't recognize flashed on my phone, but intuition urged me to answer. "Hello? Is this Kira Wilson?" The voice was unfamiliar, hesitant. "Yes, speaking. I think you need to know something about your husband, Ethan." The caller paused, as if weighing the impact of her next words. I was involved with him, but there's more you should know." The revelation wasn't a shock, but the call was a catalyst, setting in motion the final confrontation I had both dreaded and anticipated. We agreed to meet, and as I sat across from Ethan's mistress in a quiet corner of a local cafe, her story unfolded, a tale of lies and promises, similar to the one Ethan had woven around us. Armed with this new information, and with evidence that underscored Ethan's inability to change, I knew what had to be done. It wasn't just for me anymore, but for Lily, and for every promise Ethan had broken. Confronting Ethan wasn't a decision I made lightly. As I stood at his doorstep, Lily by my side, a mix of resolve and apprehension coursed through me. When he opened the door, his surprise at seeing us was evident, quickly replaced by a cautious wariness. "Kira, Lily, what are you doing here?" Ethan's voice betrayed a hint of fear, a recognition of the reckoning that stood before him. "We know, Ethan. We know everything." My voice was steady, belying the turmoil inside. "Know what?" "Kira, I can explain." Ethan's attempt at deflection was cut short by the evidence I presented, the final nails in the coffin of his deceit. The confrontation was intense, a cathartic release of months of pain and betrayal. Ethan's attempts to justify his actions fell on deaf ears, his words empty and devoid of the remorse we needed to hear. "You chose this path, Ethan. You chose to step outside our marriage, to break the trust that held our family together," I said, each word underscored by a conviction forged in the fires of betrayal. Lily's presence was a silent testament to the stakes of this confrontation. Her eyes, wide and watchful, bore witness to the crumbling facade of the father she had idolized. The realization of his loss seemed to finally dawn on Ethan, the understanding that there was no going back from the damage he had caused. "I'm sorry," he whispered, a plea for forgiveness that came too late. "Sorry doesn't undo the hurt, Ethan. It doesn't bring back the time you missed with Lily, the moments you chose to spend elsewhere." My voice broke. the weight of our collective pain bearing down on me. As we turned to leave, Ethan's voice, now laced with desperation, called out, "Kira, please, don't do this. We can still fix this." But it was over. The finality of our departure marked the end of our shared journey, a chapter closed on a marriage undermined by betrayal. In the days that followed, Lily and I leaned on each other, finding strength in our bond. The confrontation with Ethan had been a necessary closure, a way to reclaim our dignity and move forward, unburdened by the shadow of his actions. Our lives, though forever altered, began to find a new rhythm, a new normal. The pain of the past remained, a scar on our hearts, but it no longer defined us. We had faced the storm together, and in its aftermath, we found a resilience and a hope for the future that no betrayal could diminish. The aftermath of our confrontation with Ethan marked the beginning of a new chapter for Lily and me, one filled with hope, but shadowed by the remnants of past betrayals. We found solace in the embrace of my parents, who welcomed us into their home with open arms, their support a beacon of light in the lingering darkness. As we settled into our new life, the reality of our situation began to crystallize. Ethan, faced with the consequences of his actions, spiraled into a solitude of his own making. His career suffered, friendships waned, and his financial stability crumbled under the weight of alimony and child support payments mandated by the court. The social ostracism he experienced served as a stark reminder of the price of betrayal. One day, as Lily and I sat in the garden, basking in the tranquility of a life slowly piecing itself back together, she looked up at me with a question that had been lingering in her eyes for weeks. "Mom, do you think Dad will ever be part of our lives again?" I paused, considering the weight of her question. "Lily, your dad made some very big mistakes. It's up to him to make amends, to show that he's changed. But it's also okay for us to move forward, to find happiness without waiting for that to happen." Lily nodded, a maturity beyond her years settling over her features. "I just wish things could have been different," she whispered. "So do I, sweetheart, so do I," I replied, pulling her into a hug. The simplicity of the moment underscored the complexity of our journey, a journey of healing and rediscovery. The weeks turned into months, and as the seasons changed, so too did the narrative of our lives. I returned to work, embracing the challenges and satisfaction that came with my career. Lily thrived in school, her resilience a testament to her strength. Together, we navigated the waters of our new reality, finding joy in the simplicity of our daily routines. It was during this time of quiet reconstruction that I began to reflect on the journey we had undertaken. The pain, the betrayal, the fight for justice had all led us to this moment, a moment of tentative peace and cautious optimism. The struggle had not only been about revenge or holding Ethan accountable. It had been about reclaiming our lives, about ensuring that Lily grew up in a world where she felt loved, valued, and protected. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, the beauty of the moment felt like a balm to the scars we bore. "Mom, do you think we'll ever be able to forgive Dad?" Lily's question broke the silence, her voice tinged with curiosity and hope. I took a deep breath, considering her words. "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, Lily. It's about letting go of the anger and hurt so it doesn't hold us back. Your dad has a lot of work to do, but maybe one day we'll be able to forgive him. For now, let's focus on us, on building the happiest life we can." Lily smiled, a reflection of the peace we had fought so hard to achieve. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, Lily. More than anything." As the sky turned from pink to deep blue, the stars beginning to twinkle in the twilight, I realized that our story was one of resilience, of the unbreakable bond between a mother and her daughter. Despite the turmoil, the heartache, and the battles we had faced, we emerged stronger, united by our journey from despair to empowerment. Our future was uncertain, filled with challenges and opportunities in equal measure. But one thing was clear. Whatever lay ahead, Lily and I would face it together, our love and strength a testament to the power of starting anew.